The sky burned red above the once beautiful city of Alara. Gia looked up from her control panel as another explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. She had been working for 20 hours straight, her fingers flying across the screens as she tried to keep the planetary shields working long enough for the last ships to escape. "Status report," she called to her small team of 3 engineers who remained at their posts. "Eastern shield generator at 12%, said Dury, his luminescent skin flickering with stress, a natural reaction for their Novan species. When they felt strong emotions, their skin would glow brighter or dimmer. "Southern shield collapsed," reported Sun, her voice steady despite the grave news. "The wreck ships are entering the atmosphere in that sector." Gia nodded, her face grim. The wreck Dominion had appeared in their star system just 5 days ago. With their massive warships and advanced weapons, they had quickly destroyed the Novan defense fleet. Now they were finishing the job, attacking the planet itself. The Novans were a peaceful race. Their technology was advanced, but it focused on creation, not destruction. "The last evacuation ships?" Gia asked. 7 minutes until they clear the upper atmosphere," Minho answered, his fingers never stopping as he redirected power to the failing shields. Gia made a quick calculation. "We need to hold for 10 minutes minimum. After that, they'll be beyond the wreck's immediate firing range." What she didn't say was what they all knew. The 4 of them would not be leaving. Someone had to maintain the failing shield system manually, and evacuation ships were full. They had volunteered for this final duty. The Novan race had existed for thousands of years. They had built great cities, created beautiful art, and developed technology that worked in harmony with nature. Their blue-white skin would glow with a soft light, and they were known throughout nearby star systems as wise and peaceful. None of that had mattered to the wreck, who saw only a world to conquer and resources to take. Another explosion hit, much closer this time. The lights flickered, and warning alarms blared across every screen. "Direct hit on the North Power Station," Sun called out, her voice finally cracking with emotion. Her skin's glow pulsed rapidly, a sign of intense fear among their people. "Redirect. Auxiliary power," Gia ordered. She worked frantically, trying to patch together their failing systems. "How much longer?" 5 minutes until ships are clear," Minho answered. Gia felt a moment of hope. They might actually succeed. They might save the last 20,000 Novans who had managed to reach the evacuation ships. Then the world exploded around them. The blast threw Gia across the room. She slammed into the wall and crumpled to the floor. Her ears rang, and smoke filled the air. Through blurry eyes, she saw that half the control room was gone, simply ripped away by the explosion. Where Dury had been standing was now open air, with the burning city visible beyond. Gia tried to stand but couldn't. She looked down and saw a metal beam had fallen across her legs. The pain hit her then, spreading through her body like fire. She cried out, her skin flickering wildly between bright glow and dim shadow. "Sun? Minho?" she called out weakly. There was no answer. As the smoke shifted, she could see Sun's body lying motionless near what remained of her station. There was no sign of Minho. Gia closed her eyes for a moment. She had known this was a one-way mission, but she had hoped they could at least succeed before the end. She forced her eyes open and painfully pulled herself toward her damaged console. If she could just reach it, maybe she could still help the ships escape. Each movement sent waves of pain through her body. Her normally bright skin was dimming, a bad sign for a Novan. When their light began to fade, death was approaching. Still, she dragged herself forward until her fingers could touch the edge of the console. With tremendous effort, she pulled herself up enough to see the screens. Through the static and damage, she could make out the status of the evacuation ships. They were almost clear. Just another minute. Beyond them, she could see the massive shapes of the wreck warships. They were changing course, moving to pursue the escaping Novans. No, Gia thought. After everything they had sacrificed, she couldn't let that happen. With trembling hands, she accessed the final emergency protocol, one she had hoped not to use. The Planetary Defense Center where she worked also controlled the orbital satellites. Originally designed for communication and weather monitoring, Gia and her team had rewired them over the past desperate days. Now, with the right command, they could be turned into weapons once. For our people, she whispered as she entered the final code. The satellites responded immediately. They pulsed with energy, then exploded in massive bursts that struck the nearest wreck ships. The explosions weren't enough to destroy the warships completely, but they caused damage and, more importantly, confusion. On her screen, Gia could see the wreck ships changing course again, turning their attention away from the fleeing evacuation ships to deal with this unexpected attack. It had worked. The evacuation ships were moving beyond range, their engines pushing them faster and faster away from the dying world. Her people would survive. Gia let herself slide back to the floor. The pain was fading now, replaced by a spreading numbness. That was another bad sign. Her light was flickering weakly, more off than on. Through the open wall of the destroyed control room, she could see the red sky. Smoke and fire filled the air, and in the distance, she could make out the shapes of wrecked landing craft descending toward the city. They would find no one left alive to conquer. The last Novans were escaping to safety. Gia thought of her family who had left on an earlier evacuation ship. Her parents, her younger brother. They would live. They would keep the Novan culture alive, somewhere far from here. That thought brought her peace as her breathing became more difficult. The building shook again with another explosion. More debris fell around her, but Gia barely noticed. Her light was very dim now, barely visible even to her own eyes. She knew what was happening. Her life was ending. With her last strength, Gia looked up at the red sky one more time. She thought of the stars beyond, where her people were fleeing to safety, where there might be hope. May we meet again among the stars, she whispered the traditional Novan prayer for the dying. Then Gia closed her eyes, ready for darkness to take her. The pain was gone now. There was only peaceful acceptance as her light faded to nothing. Darkness. Then pain. These were the first things Gia became aware of as consciousness slowly returned to her. This was wrong. There should be nothing. She had died, or at least she thought she had. The pain told her otherwise. It pulsed through her body with each beat of her hearts. Novans had two hearts, and right now both of them hurt. She tried to open her eyes, but they felt too heavy. Something warm touched her face. A hand. Someone was touching her. With great effort, Gia forced her eyes open. The world was blurry at first, just shapes and shadows. Then a face came into focus above her. It was unlike any face she had ever seen before. The being had brown skin, not luminescent blue-white like her people. Its eyes were dark and round, filled with an emotion Gia couldn't identify. It had hair on top of its head, black and cut short. "She's awake," the being said, looking away from her to speak to someone Gia couldn't see. The language was strange to Gia's ears, but somehow she understood it. Her translator implant was still working then. That was surprising. Those implants usually stopped working when a Novan died, because she wasn't dead. "Where?" Gia tried to speak, but her voice came out as a dry whisper. Her throat felt like it was filled with sand. "Easy now," the being said, looking back at her. Its voice was gentle. "You're safe. You're on our ship. I'm Tay." The being, Tay, carefully slipped a hand behind Gia's head and lifted it slightly. With the other hand, Tay held a container of water to her lips. Gia drank slowly, the cool liquid, bringing immediate relief to her parched throat. "Human," she said after drinking. It wasn't a question. She recognized the species now, though she had never met one in person before. Humans were known in the galaxy, but they mostly kept to themselves. They weren't considered very important by most advanced species, including her own. Tay nodded. "Yes. We're humans from Earth. Our ship is called Second Chance. We found you, in the ruins." Gia tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her body and her vision swam with black spots. Tay's hands gently pushed her back down. "Don't try to move yet. Tay said. You were badly hurt. Hana says you had internal bleeding, several broken bones, and damage to your light-making organs. We don't know much about Novan biology. Gia looked down at herself for the first time. Her body was covered with bandages and strange patches that hummed softly. Her natural glow was very faint, barely visible even to her own eyes. That was not good. It meant she was still close to death. Why? She asked. It was the only question that mattered. Why would these humans save her? Before Tay could answer, a door slid open, and another human entered the small room. This one had longer hair tied back from their face and wore clothing marked with symbols Gia didn't recognize. Good, you're awake, the new human said, coming closer and looking at some device in their hand. I'm Hana, the medical officer on this ship. How are you feeling? Alive, Gia said. Which is unexpected. Hana smiled slightly. We almost lost you several times. Your physiology is very different from ours. I had to improvise many of the treatments. Why did you help me? Gia asked again, looking between the two humans. Tay and Hana exchanged glances as if confused by the question. You were dying, Tay said simply, as if that explained everything. We couldn't just leave you there, Hana added. Gia didn't understand. In her experience, most species acted out of self-interest. These humans had nothing to gain by saving her. They had put themselves at risk by staying on a planet being attacked by the wreck. The wreck, Gia said, suddenly remembering. They were attacking the evacuation ships. We didn't see any other ships when we arrived, Tay said. Just debris in orbit and the wreck ships leaving the system. Relief washed over Gia. Her sacrifice, and those of her team, had not been in vain. The evacuation ships had escaped. Her people had survived, at least some of them. The door opened again and a third human entered. This one was older than the others, with lines on their face and gray in their hair. They carried themselves with authority. Captain Jin, Tay said, straightening slightly. Our guest is awake. The captain looked at Gia with sharp eyes. Good. Maybe now we can get some answers. What were the wreck doing at your planet? And why did they leave so quickly after destroying it? Jin, Hana said, in a warning tone. She just woke up. She needs rest, not an interrogation. What we need is to get out of this system before the wreck come back, Jin replied firmly. And to do that, I need to know what we've gotten ourselves into. Gia tried to think clearly through the fog of pain and medication. These humans had saved her life. She owed them the truth. The wreck are conquerors, she said, her voice growing stronger. They attack worlds with resources they want. They kill the inhabitants or enslave them. My world, Nova, was rich in minerals they need for their ships. And they just happened to attack while we were in a nearby system? Jin asked skeptically. They have been expanding their territory for years, Gia said. It was only a matter of time before they reached us. We were a peaceful people. We had defenses, but nothing that could stop a full wreck assault. So why did they leave? Jin pressed. They destroyed your world but didn't stay to collect these valuable resources. Gia remembered her final act at the control center. I used our satellite network as weapons. It damaged some of their ships, and she hesitated. There was nothing left for them. No Novans to enslave. Everyone who survived was on the evacuation ships that escaped. Everyone except you, Tay said quietly. Gia's glow dimmed even further as the reality of her situation hit her fully. She was possibly the last Novan in this part of space. Her people were gone, fled to a sanctuary moon far from here. A sanctuary she didn't know the location of. That information had been kept secret, shared only with the evacuation ship captains. I stayed behind to make sure the shields held long enough, she explained. It was a one-way mission. I never expected to survive. Well, you did survive, Hana said, checking the patches on Gia's body. Though you're not out of danger yet. Your light is still very faint. My bioluminescence reflects my life force, Gia explained. When a Novan's light goes out completely, they die. A soft beeping came from a device on Jin's belt. The captain pulled it out and frowned at whatever was displayed. "We need to move," Jin announced. "Long-range sensors are picking up ships entering. The system could be Vrek returning to finish their salvage operation." Fear shot through Jia. The Vrek were methodical and thorough. They would not leave until they had stripped the planet of everything valuable. "If they detect your ship," she began. "They won't," Jin interrupted confidently. "We have very good cloaking technology, but I'm not taking chances. Tay, get back to the bridge. Hana, make sure our guest is secure for travel. We're leaving in 5 minutes." With that, the captain left the room as quickly as they had entered. "Can you move?" Hana asked Jia, already beginning to secure the medical equipment around her. "I can try," Jia said, though she doubted it. "I'll help," Tay said, before reluctantly adding, "Captain's orders come first, though. I need to get to the bridge." As Tay turned to leave, Jia reached out and caught their hand. The human's skin was warm against her cool blue fingers. "Thank you," she said simply, "for saving me when you had no reason to." Tay looked surprised, then smiled. "We had every reason to. You were alive. That's always reason enough." With that, Tay squeezed her hand gently and left the room. Jia watched them go, wondering at these strange humans and their even stranger values. For the first time since waking, she felt something besides pain and loss. It might have been hope. The ship shuddered as it accelerated away from the ruins of Nova. Jia felt the vibrations through the medical bed where she lay. Hana had secured her with straps and added more patches to monitor her condition during their escape. "What kind of ship is this?" Jia asked, trying to distract herself from the pain and fear. "The second chance is a salvage vessel," Hana explained as she checked readings on her medical device. "We search for abandoned ships and stations, recover valuable materials, and sell them. Not very glamorous, but it pays well enough." "Scavengers," Jia said, understanding. Such work was looked down upon by Novans who valued creation over collection. Hana smiled slightly. "We prefer resource recovery specialists. But yes, essentially we're scavengers." "And you came to my world to scavenge," Jia said. There was no accusation in her voice, just understanding. "We detected the battle from several systems away," Hana said. "By the time we arrived, it seemed over. Captain Jin thought we could recover some technology before anyone else arrived." She paused. "Finding you alive was unexpected." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. An alarm sounded and a voice came through speakers in the ceiling. "All crew to stations. Wreck ships have detected us. Evasive action." Hana quickly checked Jia's restraints once more. "I need to get to my station. Will you be all right here alone?" Jia nodded. "Go." As soon as Hana left, Jia tried to sit up despite the restraints and pain. She needed to see what was happening. If the wreck caught this ship, everyone aboard would die or worse, be enslaved, and it would be because they had stopped to save her. With great effort, she managed to reach the controls for the bed. She had seen Hana use them to raise the head section. After some fumbling, she found the right button, and the bed slowly tilted upward. Now she could see a small screen on the wall that showed the view outside the ship. What she saw made her hearts beat faster with fear. 3 wreck warships were visible, their distinctive blade-shaped hulls cutting through space toward the much smaller human vessel. The second chance was fast, darting and weaving through debris, but the wreck ships were gaining. The door slid open and Tay rushed in. "You shouldn't be sitting up," he said, moving to her side. "Your ship is in danger because of me," Jia said. "We're in danger because the wreck are ruthless hunters who don't like witnesses to their destruction," Tay corrected. "But I didn't come here to argue. Captain sent me to get you." "Get me? Why? Because you're an engineer, right?" "The captain thinks you might be able to help us." Jia's glow brightened slightly with surprise. "How do you know I'm an engineer?" "The uniform you were wearing when we found you," Tay explained as he carefully removed her restraints. "It had symbols that matched some of the technical equipment in the control room where you were." Jia was impressed by the human's observation skills. "Yes, I am an engineer, but how can I help? I don't know your systems." Technology is technology, Tay said with a shrug. He helped her stand, supporting her weight when her legs threatened to give out. And right now we need all the, help we can get. Walking was agony, but Gia forced herself to move. Tay guided her through narrow corridors, occasionally bracing them both against the wall when the ship made sharp turns to avoid wreck fire. They reached the bridge, a small room packed with equipment and 4 humans working frantically at different stations. Captain Jin stood in the center, barking orders. Dive toward the planet's debris field. Their larger ships will have trouble following. The radiation levels there are dangerously high, warned a human Gia hadn't met yet, sitting at what appeared to be the pilot's controls. Less dangerous than those disruptor cannons, Jin responded sharply. Do it, Mu. The pilot, Mu, nodded and turned the ship into a steep dive. The artificial gravity compensated somewhat, but everyone still had to grab onto something to stay upright. Jin noticed Gia and Tay. Good, you're here. Our shields are failing against their weapons. We need a solution fast. Gia looked at the main screen, which showed the pursuing wreck ships and various data about the second chance status. The human technology was different from what she was used to, but she could understand the basics. Your shield modulation is too predictable, she said, moving closer despite her pain. The wreck weapons are designed to adapt to regular patterns. Can you fix it? Jin asked bluntly. Maybe. Gia looked at the shield control station. I need to see your shield generator specs. A human moved aside to let her access the controls. Gia's hands trembled with weakness as she began to work, but her mind was clear. This was what she had trained for all her life. Finding solutions to technical problems. The wreck rely on pattern recognition in their targeting systems, she explained as she worked. If we create a random modulation sequence for the shields, it will take them longer to penetrate. Our system doesn't have that capability, the human at the shield station said. We can adapt it, Gia replied, not looking up from her work. Every shield has a frequency control. We just need to make it change constantly instead of remaining stable. Tay leaned over her shoulder. Like creating electronic noise? Gia nodded, pleased by how quickly he understood. Exactly. Instead of a clear signal, we give them static. The ship rocked violently as a wreck weapon found its mark. Warning lights flashed across all the control panels. Port shield down to 12%, someone called out. Work faster, Jin ordered. Gia's fingers moved across the unfamiliar controls, making adjustments. I need access to your main power regulation. Jin nodded to the crew member at that station, who quickly gave Gia access. She began rerouting power flows and changing settings. The human technology was primitive compared to Novan systems, but it was also simpler to modify. This might work, she muttered, but it will use a lot of power. Take it from life support if you need to, Jin said. No point saving air if we're about to be blown apart. Gia completed her modifications and looked up at Jin. Ready, but your shield generators might burn out quickly under this strain. How quickly? Minutes, maybe. I don't know how robust your systems are. Jin nodded grimly. Better than seconds, do it. Gia activated her makeshift solution. The ship's lights dimmed as power was redirected to the shields. On the main screen, the shield display changed, showing a constantly shifting pattern of energy, rather than the stable bubble it had been before. Almost immediately, the next hit from a wreck weapon caused less damage. They're having trouble locking on, Mu called out from the pilot's seat. Their shots are missing more often. Good, Jin said. Now head for that asteroid belt near the 4th planet. Full speed. As the ship accelerated toward the distant asteroid belt, Gia watched the pursuing wreck vessels. They were adjusting their firing patterns, trying to compensate for the new shield modulation. They're learning, she warned. This won't work for long. It doesn't need to, Jin replied. It just needs to work long enough. Tay helped Gia to a seat as her legs finally gave out. The effort of standing and working had drained what little strength she had. Her glow was dimming again. You did great, Tay told her quietly. Now rest. The asteroids will help us? She asked weakly. Tay nodded. We're small enough to navigate between them. The wreck ships are too big. and the mineral content in that particular belt interferes with sensors. If we can get there, we can hide. Gia looked at the determined faces of the humans around her. They were scared. She could see that clearly. But they kept working, kept fighting. They refused to give up even when facing a vastly superior enemy. You've done this before, she realized. Escaped from stronger enemies. Humans have a long history of being outgunned but not outsmarted, Tay said with a small smile. We're very good at running away when we need to. And at fighting when we can't run, added Jin, who had overheard. We're nearly at the asteroid belt. Everyone prepare for close-quarters maneuvering. As the ship raced toward potential safety, Gia felt something she hadn't expected. Admiration. These humans, with their primitive technology and small ship, were defying the mighty wreck Dominion through sheer determination and cleverness. The odds were still against them. But for the first time since waking up on the human ship, Gia allowed herself to believe they might actually survive this. 3 days passed as the second chance hid within the dense asteroid belt. The humans had powered down all non-essential systems to avoid detection by the HFY warships that continued to patrol the area. The ship drifted between the massive rocks, occasionally using small bursts from its maneuvering thrusters to avoid collisions. In the medical bay, Gia's condition slowly improved. Her natural glow had strengthened from a faint flicker to a steady, soft blue light. Hana had worked tirelessly, learning about Novan biology through trial and error and Gia's own guidance. Your second heart is functioning much better today, Hana said as she examined the medical readings. And your light-producing organs are healing. Thank you, Gia said, sitting up on her own for the first time. Few non-Novans would know how to treat someone like me, Hana shrugged. I'm trained to adapt. All human doctors are. Our own species has so many variations that flexibility is essential. The door opened and Tai entered, carrying a tray with food and water. He smiled when he saw Gia sitting up. You look better, he said, placing the tray beside her. I feel better, Gia replied. Strong enough to ask the question that has been bothering me since we escaped the wreck. What question? Tai asked. Where will you take me when we leave this asteroid belt? Your original mission failed because of me. You can't return to Nova. Where will I go now? Tai looked uncomfortable. Captain Jin wants to speak with you about that. In fact, that's why I came. If you're feeling strong enough, there's a meeting in the common room. Gia nodded and carefully stood. She was still weak, but she could walk with Tai's support. Together they made their way through the ship's narrow corridors to a small room where the entire crew had gathered. Captain Jin stood at a table displaying a star map. The 4 other crew members sat or stood around the room. Everyone looked serious. Good, you're here, Jin said when Gia entered. We need to talk about our situation. It's not good. Gia sat in the chair Tai offered her. I understand. Your ship is trapped and the wreck are hunting you because you saved me. Jin nodded. That's part of it, but there's more. The captain pointed to the star map. While you were recovering, we intercepted wreck communications. They're not just looking for us. They're tracking the evacuation ships from your world. Gia's glow flared with alarm. That's impossible. The evacuation route was kept secret. Only the ship captains knew the coordinates. The wreck are very good at tracking, Jin said grimly. They've found traces of the ship's engine signatures. They're following them. Gia felt sick with fear. But the evacuation ships were heading to our sanctuary moon. If the wreck find it, she didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what would happen. The wreck would finish what they had started at Nova, the complete destruction of the Novan people. How many survived on the evacuation ships? Mu asked quietly from his place near the wall. 20,000, Gia answered. All that remains of my species. Silence fell over the room. 20,000 lives hanging in the balance. We need to warn them, Gia said finally. They don't know they're being followed. The wreck are jamming all long-range communications in this sector, said a crew member Gia now knew was named Seok, the ship's communication specialist. We can't send a message. Then we have to go there, Gia insisted, her glow pulsing with emotion. We have to warn them in person. Captain Jin looked at her steadily. We don't know where your sanctuary moon is. You said only the evacuation. Ship captains knew. Jia hesitated. The location of the sanctuary moon was one of the most closely guarded secrets of her people. But what good was keeping that secret if it meant the death of everyone there? I don't know the exact coordinates, she admitted. But I know it's in the Talaran Nebula. The gases there interfere with sensors, making it a good hiding place. The Talaran Nebula is enormous, Jin said, manipulating the star map to show the vast colorful cloud of gas and dust. It would take months to search it all. The sanctuary moon orbits a yellow dwarf star, Jia added. That narrows it down to maybe a dozen systems within the nebula. Jin zoomed in on the map, highlighting several star systems. Still a large area to search, and we'd have to get past the wreck fleet that's already heading there. So you won't help? Jia asked, her voice small. I didn't say that, Jin replied. I'm explaining the difficulties. There's a difference. Hana stepped forward. The Freck don't know which system inside the nebula houses your sanctuary. That gives us an advantage. They'll have to search them, all just like we would. But they have many ships, Jia pointed out. They can search faster. Speed isn't always an advantage, Tay said thoughtfully, especially in a nebula. The faster you go, the easier it is to miss things or make mistakes. Jin nodded slowly. And the wreck are methodical. They'll search each system thoroughly before moving to the next. That takes time. Jia looked at the humans, realizing they were actually considering this impossible mission. You would risk yourselves for my people? After barely escaping the wreck once already? Mu laughed softly. We're discussing how to do it, not whether to do it. But why? Jia asked, genuinely confused. You have no connection to the Novans. We never even established formal relations with humans. Because it's 20,000 lives, Hana said simply. And because the Vrek need to be stopped, added Seok. If they destroy your people, they'll just move on to the next world. Jia looked at each of their faces, seeing determination and resolve where she had expected fear and refusal. These humans whom her people had dismissed as primitive and unimportant were willing to risk everything to save a species that had never shown them any respect. I still don't understand, she admitted. Jin sighed. Look, humans have a saying. All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We know about the Vrek now. We can't just walk away. But your ship is small, Jia said. What can you possibly do against a wreck fleet? We can be smart, Tay said with a smile. We can be fast, and we can warn your people before the Vrek arrive. Jin turned back to the star map. The way I see it, we have one advantage the Vrek don't. We have you. You know your people's protocols, their communication codes. If we can get close enough to the sanctuary moon, you can convince them we're not a threat. And then what? Jia asked. Even if we warn them, where will they go? The wreck will find them eventually. One step at a time, Jin said. First, we need to get out of this asteroid belt without being detected. Then we need to reach the Talaran Nebula ahead of the main Vrek fleet. I might have an idea about that, Seok said. The Vrek communicate using quantum entanglement relays. It's faster than light, but it leaves a trace. I've been monitoring their communications while we've been hiding. Their main fleet is taking a direct route to the nebula. So? Mu asked. So we don't have to take the direct route, Seok replied with a smile. We can use the gravity well of the nearby pulsar to slingshot us toward the nebula. It's dangerous, but it could cut our travel time by half. And the second chance is small enough to attempt it, Jin added, considering the idea. The wreck ships are too large. They'd be torn apart by the gravitational forces. It's still very risky, Hana warned. The radiation alone could kill us. We have radiation shielding, Tay pointed out. Not enough for a pulsar at close range, Hana argued. Jia listened to them debate, her mind racing. These humans were seriously planning to risk their lives, not just for her, but for her entire species. It went against everything she had been taught about other races, especially less advanced ones like humans. I can help improve your radiation shielding, she offered suddenly. Novan technology is very good at handling radiation. If you have the right materials, I could modify your shields. Everyone looked at her. If we do this, she continued, her glow strengthening with determination, we do it together. You saved my life. Now let me help you save my people. Captain Jin studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Agreed. Tay, work with Jia on the shield modifications. Seok, plot our course past the pulsar. Mu, figure out how we get out of this asteroid belt without the wreck noticing. Hana, make sure we have all medical preparations in place for high radiation exposure. We leave in 6 hours. As the meeting broke up and everyone moved to their tasks, Jia felt something new growing inside her. Hope. Not just for her own survival, but for her entire species. And it had come from the most unexpected source, a small ship of humans whom the galaxy had overlooked. Perhaps that was their greatest strength. The wreck, like the Novans, had underestimated humans. Jia would not make that mistake again. The second chance emerged from the pulsar's gravitational field, with its engines straining and warning alerts flashing across every control panel. The small ship had been pushed to its limits, but the dangerous maneuver had worked. They had gained precious time in their race to reach the Novan sanctuary moon before the wreck fleet. Damage report, Captain Jin demanded as the ship stabilized. Hull integrity at 70%, Seok reported. Engines overheating but functional. The radiation shields held, thanks to Jia's modifications. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at the Novan engineer. Jia stood beside Tay at the sensor station, her blue skin glowing more brightly than it had since they found her. The past week had seen her strength return as she worked alongside the humans, modifying their shield systems and helping them prepare for this desperate mission. The Talaran Nebula is ahead, Mu announced from the pilot's seat. We'll reach its outer boundary in 20 minutes. Any sign of wreck ships? Jin asked. Tay checked the long-range scanners. Nothing yet. The pulsar's radiation is making it hard to get clear readings, but I think we've pulled ahead of them. We're not safe yet, Jin reminded everyone. Once we enter the nebula, visibility will be near zero. We'll have to rely on short-range sensors only. Jia nodded in agreement. The nebula's gases interfere with most scanning technology. It's why my people chose it for our sanctuary. But it also means we'll have trouble finding the exact location. You said it was a yellow dwarf star, Hana said. We can scan specifically for that stellar type. There are several yellow dwarf systems in the nebula, Jia said. She hesitated, then added, but there is something else that might help us. The sanctuary moon has a unique mineral composition. It produces a faint resonance frequency when exposed to certain radiation bands. You're only telling us this now? Jin asked sharply. It was classified information, Jia explained. But yes, I should have mentioned it earlier. I'm sorry. Tay smiled at her. Can you help us modify our sensors to detect this resonance? Jia nodded. I can try. As they approached the nebula's edge, Jia and Tay worked quickly to recalibrate the ship's sensors. The nebula loomed ahead of them on the main view screen, a vast, colorful cloud of gas and dust that stretched across space. Beautiful, but dangerous. Entering. Nebula in 5 minutes, Mu announced. Sensors recalibrated, Tay reported. We're ready to scan for the resonance frequency Jia described. Jin nodded. Good. Reduce speed to 1/4 once we enter the nebula. Raise shields to maximum. If the wreck are already in there, I want to be ready. The ship crossed the boundary into the nebula, and the view screen filled with swirling colors, blues, purples, and reds mixing together as the gases enveloped the small vessel. Visibility dropped immediately, just as Jin had warned. Beginning scan for yellow dwarf stars, Seok said. I'm picking up 3 within scanning range, Tay added, starting resonance frequency scan on each one. Minutes passed in tense silence as the ship moved carefully through the nebula. Jia watched the sensor readings over Tay's shoulder, hoping to see the distinctive pattern that would indicate the sanctuary moon. I think I've got something, Tay said finally. Third star system is showing a faint resonance matching the frequency Jia provided. That's it. Gia said, her glow pulsing with excitement. That has to be the sanctuary moon. Set course, Jin ordered. But approach with caution. We don't know if the wreck have arrived before us. Mu adjusted their heading, and the ship moved, deeper into the nebula toward the third star system. As they drew closer, Gia felt her hearts beating faster. After everything they had been through, they were finally approaching her people's last refuge. But had they arrived in time? Entering the star system now, Mu reported. The gases cleared slightly as they approached the yellow star, allowing better visibility. Gia counted the planets as they appeared on the sensors. 1, 2, 3. There, she said, pointing to the screen. The fourth orbit. That's the sanctuary moon. The moon came into view on the main screen, a small bluish-green world orbiting a gas giant. Gia felt tears forming in her eyes, the new home of her people, the last hope for the Novan species. I'm detecting artificial structures on the surface, Seok said, and ships in orbit, Novan design. They made it, Gia whispered. They're alive. We're being scanned, Tay reported suddenly. They've detected us. A moment later, a communication signal came through. A stern Novan voice spoke. Unidentified vessel, you have entered restricted space. Identify yourself immediately or be fired. Upon. Gia moved quickly to the communication panel. This is Engineer Gia of Nova. I was part of the last defense team. I survived and am aboard a human vessel. We bring urgent warning. The wreck have tracked the evacuation ships. They're coming. There was a long pause before the reply came. Transmit identification code. Gia entered her personal code into the system. Another tense silence followed. Identity confirmed, the voice finally said, sounding shocked. Stand by for docking instructions. The Council wishes to speak with you immediately. As the coordinates for a docking bay appeared on their navigation screen, Gia turned to the humans. They believe me. We made it in time. Let's not celebrate. Yet, Jin cautioned. We still need to prepare them for the Freck arrival. The second chance followed the provided coordinates, approaching a large space station in orbit around the sanctuary moon. Several Novan defense ships moved into position around them, escorting them to a docking bay. Your people don't seem very trusting, Hana observed. We trusted others before, Gia said quietly. It didn't end well. When they docked, Gia and the humans were met by a group of armed Novan guards. Their skin glowed with the bright blue light of healthy, strong Novans, making Gia suddenly aware of how dim her own light still was by comparison. The Council is waiting, the lead guard said, barely glancing at the humans. They were escorted through the station to a large chamber where 5 Novans sat at a raised table. They were older than Gia, their skin showing the deeper blue color that came with age. Engineer Gia, one of them said. We thought you dead with the rest of the defense team. How did you survive? Gia stepped forward. I would have died, Counselor, Rami. But these humans found me in the ruins of our control center and saved my life. And now they have risked everything to bring warning. The Freck are tracking the evacuation ships. They will find this sanctuary soon. The council members looked at the humans with open suspicion. Why would humans involve themselves in our affairs? Another counselor asked. What do they gain from this? Gia had expected this reaction. Novans had always been wary of other species, especially those they considered less advanced. But before she could answer, Tay stepped forward. With respect, he said, we didn't stop to calculate gain when we found Gia dying, and we didn't pause to consider advantage when we learned your people were in danger. Some things matter more than profit or politics. The counselors looked surprised to be addressed directly by a human. Jin moved to stand beside Tay. We're a small salvage crew, the captain said. We can't fight the Vrek for you. But we've learned how they track ships, how they communicate, and how they attack. This information might help you escape before they arrive. Escape to where? Counselor Remy asked. This sanctuary was our last hope. Perhaps not, Gia said, her mind racing with a new idea. The humans have shown me that we've been thinking about this wrong. The wreck are powerful because they're predictable and methodical. But humans are unpredictable. They do things that make no logical sense, like risking their lives for strangers. She turned to face both the council and the human crew. We have technology the humans lack. They have courage and creativity we've forgotten. Together we might find a way not just to run, but to fight back. A sudden alarm blared through the station. A Novan officer rushed into the chamber. Counselors, we've detected ships entering the nebula. Wreck configuration, multiple vessels. How long do we have? Remy demanded. Hours at most. The council members looked at each other, then at Gia and the humans. It seems we have little choice, Remy said finally. Engineer Gia, you and your human allies have our attention. Tell us your plan. Gia looked at Tay, who smiled encouragingly. Together, he said quietly. Gia nodded and turned back to the council. Her glow brightened with determination as she began to outline how Novan technology and human ingenuity might combine to create a strategy the wreck would never expect. She had closed her eyes on her dying world, expecting darkness. Instead, she had found hope in the most unexpected place, the hands of a human who saw life where others saw only death. Now that connection might save not just her, but all their futures.